Welcome back, everybody, to Coffee Code and Culture. Today's episode, we've got myself, Amy, we've got Joshua Humphrey, and we also have a special guest for this episode, Dylan Faulk, who is one of the developers here at Worthwhile. So, Dylan, I'll let you introduce yourself, and you can say what you do here and kind of how you got into your job at Worthwhile.
Yeah, so my name's Dylan. I've been working in the software development industry for about a year and a half now. Went to Clemson, graduated with a degree in computer science. So that's kind of who I am, at least. And then here at Worthwhile, I fill a couple of roles for some projects, QA, some of them just front end, some back end, a little bit of everything.
So, today's episode, we wanted to talk about getting into the tech industry and like how to get into the tech industry, um, different job hacks, preparing for your first developer job, stuff
Mhm.
like that. So, Joshua, I know you talked about your background before, but do you want to give us a recap for anybody who hasn't heard how you got into the development world?
Sure. So I'm a career switcher. I was a chef for a long time, and that's not really good for you to do for a long time. So I started to learn to code on the side, and then I did go to a coding boot camp and then started to freelance after that because I couldn't get a job with that with that experience that I had. Yeah, I just started to work from there from client to client and then eventually got some quote unquote real jobs.
I know my background, I talked about a little bit on the episode on imposter syndrome, but I went to college for a couple of years for computer science. That wasn't working out. So I took a gap year, started doing some of the on your own learning, specifically through Free Code Camp, which their resources are really good. And then ended up switching to a different college and finished out my degree in software development in December, last December. So it's been a little bit over a year now. And then I had a QA job for about 6 months, didn't really like it, and then landed here as a full stack engineer. So, Dylan, I think this is one of your first development jobs as well. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is, quote unquote, like my first big boy job. The 9 to 5 actually coming in working. I've had an internship in college. That wasn't really a whole lot. It was really just bringing a company up to the standard with, just certain, what are they called? Certain metrics where you just got to make sure you're keeping security tight.
Makes sense. So, why did you choose computers or software specifically?
Uh, that's a really good question. I don't know. I've actually been saying I wanted to work in software development since middle school. And I've taken steps along the way just to kind of help get myself there, doing code camps through the summers when I was in middle school. In high school, I went to like a career school, I guess you could say, for like 3 hours a day for my junior and senior year, where I learned how to code in C++, and then just kind of rolled into it. I just enjoy it and it's a ton of fun. So
I know, Josh, you said you were tired of getting cut and tired of getting burnt and tired of the work environment.
Yeah, it's a lot of
But
yelling.
what made you choose code specifically as opposed to some other 9 to 5 business job?
I think it's kind of always what I've wanted to do. I just never thought that I was smart enough to do it. And I'm a pretty habitual self-defeater, or self-rejecter, which is something I would like to talk about later. So remind me if I forget. And then I just tried it, one day when I was trying to learn, and I was like, this is really kind of fun. You don't have to do as much math as I was led to believe. So
Yes, yes. I had to take calculus in like the first college that I went to, and it nearly had me switching majors. It was very difficult, and yet so far in this job, I have yet to do any calculus. So I
okay.
get that the mathematical background can be helpful for a lot of things, but for a lot of development, especially what I do specifically, there's
Mhm.
not a ton of math involved. Or if there is, then you can Google it or get somebody else's answer and then tweak it to what you need it to be. You don't have to like pull out the TI-89 and start punching in numbers.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like some of those classes, kind of like the calculus classes, are a bit of kind of a weed out for certain courses, just whether or not you can adapt and improvise for this kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it too is, and I've heard it like compared to football and doing push-ups. You never see a football player doing push-ups out on the field during a game, but the
Hmm.
push-ups is what enables them to be able to play better on the field, is having that strength training. So the
Hmm.
math or that sort of technical thinking can prepare you for the software developing, even if you're not actually doing that math while you're developing. It's the same kind of idea.
Yeah, that's really well put.
Let's talk about the job hunt. Obviously, each of us have applied to a lot of different places, coming from different backgrounds, coming from, getting our first development job or one of our first development jobs. So, what is something that you guys encountered during the job hunt that was helpful for you, or something that was unhelpful, or just a funny story you want to share?
I mean, one of the things that helped me out a lot was kind of realizing and getting that understanding that the company that you're applying to, they have people to actually look at your resume and decide if you're a good fit for the job. They don't need your help with you already deciding whether or not you're a good fit. Just going ahead and applying, just shooting it, and just seeing what happens. That was the biggest thing that kind of turned me from I don't know if I can do these, just I'm just gonna do it, see what happens. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a great point, and like something I started to do kind of a lot at the beginning of my job search. I'm like, oh, I can't, like, I don't know this. If I
Hmm.
didn't meet like every requirement on their list, I wouldn't apply. And you don't really need to meet every requirement. That's a wish list for them.
Hmm.
But what I'm getting at is don't think, let them reject you. Not don't do it for them.
Yeah.
Make them work.
Right. And the worst that they can say is no, or just not get back to you, which happens a lot too. But
That's the more likely response I
unfortunately,
found.
but it doesn't hurt to apply,
Hmm.
even if you didn't have to hear back. I know for this job, granted, I started applying for jobs last June. So coming off of a lot of big tech companies deciding to lay off a bunch of people, there's a lot of people applying for jobs. I would see something on LinkedIn or another job posting, and it would say like 500 applicants already posted 4 hours ago. So that was kind of discouraging. But one of the things that helped me personally was realizing that I don't need 500 jobs. I can apply to 500 jobs. All I need is one.
Hmm.
Granted, it should be a job that fits with my skill set, a job that is in a location or remote that I'm able to do. But as long as I'm applying for that type of job, I only need one. So that was kind of encouraging. I don't need to hear back or hear a yes from everybody that I apply to, because at the end of the day, I'm only working for one company.
It gets pretty tough. Sending out, I don't know, I've heard people get up to like 1,000 applications, not hearing anything back. It's really kind of difficult to keep getting the rejections or keep getting ghosted.
Hmm.
But the only thing you can do is keep sending them.
Now, I know for my job search, I applied to like 100 or 150 different places. So, I mean, when you get that rejection, or if you get in the interview, you finally get it, and then you do 2 or 3 hours worth of stuff just to then be like, okay, we're cutting you at this point. I don't know. That
That
really does
stings.
break you.
Yeah.
I had a fun experience. A lot of times I feel like you have the technical interview or like a code challenge
Mhm.
before you end up talking to somebody at the company. That's what happened for me. Was it a insurance company, I think? It was a relatively big company, and they sent me this code challenge. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do this. It's a big company. It'd be kind of cool to put on my resume. I'm excited about it. I get into like set up my workstation, get into the code challenge, hit start, and realize that it is in a programming language that I have not refreshed myself in a very long time. And it's one of those challenges where you can't navigate away from the screen. So
Mhm.
you can't like pull up the documentation, you can't pull up the syntax for it, anything like that. And I sat there for probably about 5 minutes just staring at it, trying to full information that was no longer in my brain, and then I just hit quit, and then I went for a walk because there was no way I was going to get something effective in 40 minutes in a language that I had not programmed in a very long time. So I've definitely had experiences like that as well.
Yeah, no, those can definitely be tricky, the ones where you can't navigate away from, because I feel like so much in our field, you don't need to memorize everything. I don't need to memorize the exact syntax of like an event emitter. I can go look that up if I need to. It's the fact that I know it's there and can just recall enough to actually get things done. So it's really weird, those certain challenges where you just can't navigate away.
Yeah, they expect you to have it memorized or at least close. And I get the idea of it. If somebody does have it memorized, sure, they'll be a good developer. But there's so many good developers that, or even like if I had spent 20 minutes refreshing on the syntax of that language before I went into the technical interview, I would have done 100 times better. But it
Mm.
didn't say what language it was going to be in when I started it. Either that or it had like a list, and then it didn't let me select a specific language. He's like, nope, here you go. You have C or C++. I don't remember what language it was in.
I'm trying to remember how it went down for Worthwhile with our interview. I think it was in Python.
The one I did was in a couple different languages. They had, I think something was in Python. They had a Swagger documentation for like API, and then you're finding bugs and stuff and different problems in that file, which I had never used before. But because you can navigate away from the page, I was able to do that, look up like, okay, quick documentation on this, and then use that information to figure out the problems I needed to figure out. So, Josh, what's your experience with technical interviews? Have any horror
Um,
stories?
I had a similar thing happen to me where I was like, okay, front end web dev job looking for JavaScript. It's like, I know JavaScript. And I started the code challenge and it was in Ruby, which I had never even looked at. So I did my best, I had just kind of looked it up on the second monitor and tried to do what I could, but it was not satisfactory.
Have you guys had the type of technical interview where they'll sit in the room with you because they kind of want to see like how you think, not so much what your code looks like?
I have never done one of those. Everything I've done, all the work I've done has been remote.
Hmm.
So I've never even interviewed with someone in an office.
Oh, no, no, no. It was over Zoom. They just had me like
Oh,
share my screen. So I couldn't navigate away, but it was in C, so I was fine. But like that, I had three 45-minute technical interviews back to back. So I just had to sit there, talk to someone. They wanted me to talk through my process, do it, and then like, okay, how can we refine this? And I'm like, hash map? Maybe I can do that in C?
Wow. That I I can see why they would have somebody sit in on the interview because that would be more of a okay, can this guy problem solve? Does this guy know what he's talking about? But three back to back, that has got to be draining.
It was. I just went to sleep like right after it.
so I was talking to my little brother who graduated from Texas State not too long ago with a CS degree. And he was like, man, I'm getting so frustrated because I'm applying to all these places and I'm not hearing back from anybody. I'm like, all right, what are you doing in the meantime? Like, well, nothing really. Like, you got to like keep working on your side projects. And the cool thing about side projects is you never have to finish it. But as long as you're like sharpening your skills and showing that you are working, developing your skills and like get your portfolio side up or like have your projects linked on your resume
Mhm.
and just keep like don't wait for someone to tell you you can start coding, just start building stuff and getting better and be prepared for when you do get the opportunity.
I feel like just kind of scouting through LinkedIn, you can kind of see what's kind of hot right now. Because I know in a lot of college courses, they'll teach you something either Java, Python, or C. But when you come out, they're like, yeah, we want JavaScript, we want X, Y, and Z languages. And I feel like you can kind of see those on LinkedIn, and then you can start kind of practicing those skills. So when it comes to the interview, you can be like, yeah, I'm somewhat proficient.
And as long as you're somewhat proficient and like know how to think through your problems, and if you know one programming language, I don't they're not they all kind of have to work the same way because that's how computers work.
Yeah.
So you can kind of extrapolate as long as you're mostly proficient.
I
Goes
think
back
that
to our point again about self-rejecting.
Yeah.
just because you don't know it now doesn't mean you can't learn it. I think that sort of segues into one of the next topics, which is how do you figure out what type of computer job to go for? Because I know when I was either starting my degree or when I was thinking about going into the computer field, which happened for me in like my senior year of high school, is when I started getting into computers. And then I had to choose, okay, there's a lot of different types of jobs here. I could go hardware, I could go computer engineering, I could go software development, I could go web development, computer science, and even within just web development or computer science, there's hundreds of different types of jobs as well.
Hmm.
So, how did you guys pick or figure out what you wanted to do in computers specifically?
I guess I spend a lot of time on the internet, even before I was a developer. So I kind of just wanted to, I don't know, be a part of that, build stuff that people will use.
I don't know. I feel like I just kind of followed the dopamine. I just,
It's a
you
life
know, I,
motto right there.
yeah, I knew I wanted to do something in software development. What specifically, had no idea. So I mean, there for the longest time, I was thinking cybersecurity because I'd done a few like code camps where I did some cybersecurity, and I was like, this is so much fun. Doing like what's the challenges? The Red Hat challenges. Those were fun. And then I actually took some classes, tried to do some actual cybersecurity, and I just wasn't enjoying it. So I decided to switch tracks, try on a bunch of different hats and really just figured out kind of what my passion was. And, it just came to just general development, just building things, kind of like Josh said, building things that people are going to use. It makes you feel good knowing like I'm putting something out in the world that's going to get used, that's going to have some sort of impact.
I know mine, it along the same lines of doing something that is helpful. Um, I definitely enjoyed that. But for me, I had to really experiment with a bunch of different things
Mhm.
because I didn't know what all was out there. And I still don't. There's a lot of areas that I'm not super familiar with, and it's the tech industry. It'll be completely different in about 5 years anyway. So it's always, in my opinion, it's always worth it to keep experimenting. If you have a personal project, if you have a free weekend, play around with some area of technology that you've never experimented with before, and you might end up making it your next job. Um, I started playing around with web development stuff in high school, and that's ultimately what led me to choosing computer science as a degree. So it's came through that kind of curiosity of just exploring something new that I ended up here. And in the next 5 years, I might start playing around with something else and end up in a slightly different area of computers.
It's cool to kind of hear people because at least for me, I only knew like 20 other people that were really into software in high school and like earlier on. But it's cool to hear more people talk about their interest in it before they got to college or that before they figured stuff out. And it's cool to see it happening earlier. So my sister, she's a teacher. She teaches like fifth grade, so 10-year-olds. And she'll send me like videos of them like their Scratch projects or their coding in, I think one of them was coding in Python. And it's just crazy to think that there are kids that young that are like really getting into it these days.
I got to volunteer for a robotics judging competition, and it was high schoolers and middle schoolers, and it was with some robotics organization that I don't remember the name, but they had this game that the robots had to play of going like over this one pipe or under this other pipe and moving these balls under this net. And just talking to the kids, I got to be one of the judges, and I wasn't judging the robots on the field. I got to talk to the kids who were programming it and asking questions like, why did you choose this design feature, or how did you program this part of it to work? And just hearing some of the middle schoolers talk was super cool, just to see how invested they were. And a lot of them, for the programming side, said, I've never programmed before. This is my first year doing it. And here's this robot that works. So that's super cool that those opportunities exist. I probably would have gotten really into that if that was an opportunity for me when I was in middle school.
Yeah, I feel
But
ripped off.
right? Like I'd go to a robots competition. I mean, I did as a judge, but I probably would have been that middle schooler just designing a robot in the corner.
Yeah, no
Would have been
doubt.
fun.
So cool.
So we talked about like how to choose or how to figure out what to choose in a computer job, whether that's web development or just playing around with stuff to figure out what you enjoy. But how about the choosing if you want to specialize or if you want to stay as generic as possible, kind of like a jack of all trades? What do you guys think?
I feel like it's important to be able to cover every base, kind of aim for that full stack development position. Because I feel like if you just specialize too much and you over specialize, I mean, you're really going to narrow down what you can actually apply for, work for. And it's kind of like we talked about earlier. You gotta see what's out there in the market, see what's going on. Just have your have your finger on the pulse of a lot of different things. I know it worthwhile we talk about like the T-shaped developer where you've got across the board, you're proficient in things, but you've got that one area that you're just like you're deep in that. And it's like, yeah, that's the go-to guy for this subject.
I think that's the way to be, like a solid foundation and then a really deep understanding of one particular area.
Mm-hmm.
So that way when someone's like, hey, what's wrong with, like for instance, working with some SRE stuff, which I never do, I can listen to it and understand like kind of what's going on without being completely lost. But with that sort of stuff, that's about it for me.
Yeah, same
DevOps
same
is
here.
like magic.
It's a black magic of like you deploy the code and then it works,
Yeah,
and
then where does it go?
anything else in that zone is why we have other people who decided that that's their area of specialty, which is
Mhm.
good.
And it's good just to reach out to those guys, even for like personal projects. I was trying to learn Docker and like spinning up a container, working on all those files, and I was just lost. So I reached out to like Josh Sherman, and he was kind of able to help point me in the right direction. Ended up sending him a bunch of more questions, and it was really awesome that he was able to kind of help me through that and help me over that hump. I don't know, it's always nice to just know a person like that.
Absolutely, especially for I feel like for starting developers to try to join a company where there's those people that are willing to mentor you, or find
Mhm.
people outside of the company that you work for if you don't have a job yet, or just in general, it's good to have multiple sources of people who like, hey, tell me what you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are that I've found are very willing to do that as long as you're not like every minute of the day, hey, what you doing?
Hmm.
But when people are passionate about something, they typically like to talk about it. So hearing what different people are passionate about and then learning from that is super cool.
Yeah. Where do you think that line gets drawn between like just taking an interest in their interests versus just bugging them all the time? Where do you kind of find that line?
Hmm.
Because I
Let
know,
I
let them find the line for you, you know? Again,
yeah,
don't self-reject. They when you can tell they're annoyed, then you back off.
yeah,
that's yeah, that's good. Or even like starting out with, hey, I want to know more about this, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
hmm,
And giving them that opportunity to say, hey, I'm interested in this. You tell me when you need to get, quote, back to work or to focus on something else. Oh, I did have one other note on the jack of all trades versus being very specialized. I think it's helpful to be specialized because you see a lot of the job descriptions that say they want 4 to 6 years in this specific language.
hmm,
But I think being a jack of all trades has benefited me so much in my current job. And granted, that's kind of what full stack engineering is. And I think that's why I lean towards it because I like knowing a little bit about everything. I
hmm.
like and that goes for random trivia, that goes for other random hobbies. But being able to take something, a design element from the screen on the web page back, to the front end logic, to the API calls, to the database, and then all the way back, being able to work with all of that, I really enjoyed doing that sort of thing. So for me, the jack of all trades is kind of what I lean towards, but it fits a full stack engineer role pretty well.
Yeah, just kind of covering all those bases. It also helps just being able to slot in and fill in where you need to. Because I know some projects, we might not always have a data guy, but it's nice if you know enough that you can cover for the start. And then once somebody frees up that's a little bit more knowledgeable and kind of slot in, there's definitely some benefit to that.
And we've
The
definitely got a jack of all trades here. We've talked with him before, but Greg can do like pretty much anything,
Yeah.
and he's always willing to.
No, Greg is a go-to guy.
Sorry, Amy, I cut you off.
You're good. The thought has completely left my head.
I can relate to that.
It's gone. It's okay. If it comes back, it'll come back if it's important enough. Do we have any last thoughts? Any advice for people who are considering getting into the tech world or trying to figure out what job to choose?
I guess the first thing I think you should consider is it a job that I want to do, or am I just trying to get in? I mean, getting your foot in the door is one thing, but getting a job you don't enjoy, I don't want to say it's worse than not having a job because you're getting paid, but it can be pretty miserable.
No, I definitely want to kind of piggyback off that thought. It's important to try and get a job, and you'll apply to a lot, get some interviews. But you got to remember that in that interview, especially when you meet face to face with some other employees, maybe some higher ups, you got to kind of get a feel for if you're going to match with them just as much as they're going to match with you. Because I had one interview where I actually got the call, got to hop on, talk to the owner, and he's a nice guy, but he made some comments, kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and I just kind of felt like I wasn't going to really enjoy working with them. And I just had to shut that door on myself and just be like, a job isn't really worth kind of like the mental strain that being in like maybe a toxic work environment or somewhere where you're not going to feel appreciated. It's really just not worth it. That's a good point.
Yeah, be choosy,
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to those who are considering either switching to a tech career or going into a tech career is that if you enjoy learning, you enjoy problem solving, then as long as you can do both of those things, you can do coding. I know, like what Josh said, he thought it was very intimidating, and there's a lot of brain work to it. But as long as you can learn and as long as you can problem solve, and if you enjoy doing both of those things, then that's sounds like right up the alley for a developer job. Regardless of if that's like front end, back end, API, you got to figure that part out for yourself.
That's true. It's whether or not you like making things look pretty or, if you hate yourself and you want to work in back end. No, anytime people ask me, I usually tell them that software development or coding, it's like learning another language and then explaining and giving directions to a 3-year-old. They know enough that they can figure some stuff out, but you got to be just really detailed about it. But so long as you can be detailed, problem solve, I mean, you can be up aces. I don't know. The biggest thing is just that getting into the field, the first job, that's always the hardest one. It's actually breaking in. That's, anytime I ask people for advice, that's usually what they got to say. It's just, it's hard getting in. But after that, pretty good.
Yeah. So don't be discouraged if you keep applying and keep getting rejected. It's the hardest part. You're in the hardest part.
Yeah.
Once you're actually programming, it's downhill almost. Emotionally. It's up and down. It's up and down.
You got wins, you got losses.
Is that everything we have to talk about? If
I
so,
think that's a wrap.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and don't give up. Be persistent and be prepared, and it'll happen.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me up, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Dylan.
All right. We will catch you guys next time.